Alan, I appreciate you being on the show with me today. Tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Well, great. First of all, thanks for having me, Andy. I appreciate the conversation. My name is Alan Smyth. I'm the executive director for an anti-human trafficking agency based in Los Angeles called Saving Innocence. And for 11 years, we've been focusing on the child victims of sex trafficking, helping us first responders contracted with the county to show up around the clock and step into these little kiddos' life and help rehumanize them and get them their life back.
Yeah, that has to be a rewarding and terrible job all at the same time.
You nailed it exactly. It's equal parts rewarding and equal parts heartbreaking. We actually have a sign in our office. Can you believe we get to do this? In fact, we just had a team building event last week and all of our staff got t-shirts that said, can you believe we get to do this? So we want to focus on the privilege that it is and the honor that it is. Mm-hmm. At the same time, children are being traumatized beyond measure, even up to the point of they are losing their lives. We've had a number of our kids lose their lives over the last year. So it really is heartbreaking at a deep level.
Yeah, it is. I've often pointed out on my show that sex trafficking is an industry of supply and demand. We have a terrible amount of people who are trafficked. So that kind of means we have a horrific demand for sex trafficking. In your experience, where does this demand come from?
Yeah, no, it's again, you're nailing it, Andy. You're all over this thing. It is absolutely a supply and demand industry, to use a crass business term when you talk about human beings, but that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It's an economically driven crime. The demand, the supply follows the demand, and the demand comes from to know, maybe no one's confusion. The United States of America is the largest producer and consumer of sexual violence and sexual content and pornography and all these different things. So it makes sense that it's here. The demand comes from, I think it sprouts from a culture that largely doesn't value life, largely doesn't value women, largely doesn't value minority women. Those are the biggest piece of the pie chart of the victims that we service, or be that demographic. And America is full of a bunch of people with extra time and extra money in their pocket and extra entitlement. And there's a high degree of brokenness and fatherlessness. And these young would-be buyers and these young would-be sellers are growing up in a culture where sexual assault is glamorized in the music, is glamorized in the media. And if there's not a dad present, and there's a lot of great moms that are doing their job too, but without a dad present to really interpret what's happening, kids, young people, boys and girls go down a certain path. And here comes the demand, because we're an entitled culture, and we get what we want.
Yeah. And you would think in the land of the free, we wouldn't have this type of problem. So kind of bring this home for me. Most of my audience lives in the United States, and they'll say, oh, I thought this was only a third world, kind of problem. How close is this to the average family?
Shockingly close. The national hotline run by the Polaris Project has certainly human trafficking reports in every state, all 50 states. And so you go to a really densely populated urban center like Los Angeles or New York or Miami, you would expect it. But even out in the fields of North Dakota and all these other kind of places in the country, it's everywhere. You might even say it's in every zip code. There might be a couple zip codes where maybe it's not actually happening, but it's everywhere. And it's important to note for your audience to understand, the FBI recently said there's 900,000 predators online. Yesterday, I saw a little meme on social media, and it showed a lion slinking around in the deep grass. Mm-hmm. And when the weak, slow one ran by, he pounced on that one. He's not pouncing on the strong, confident one. It's the weak, slow one. And so just to underline the role of parents and dads to help raise strong, confident children, and they'll be less vulnerable to these predators that are out there.
Well, you know what, man, you're led right to my next question here. And you work with children, and kids seem to be especially vulnerable to trafficking. What are the factors that make kids such targets?
Yeah, all kids in general are obviously lacking life experience. That's what makes them children. Yeah, sure. They haven't been alive very long. And there's some immaturity, which comes with being a kid. The wonderment of being a child is great. The problem is these predators are preying on those vulnerabilities. And the major factor that we see is that a large percentage of the young victims have already experienced an early childhood abuse
Mm.
by the people that were closest to them, a family member, a neighbor. And in their young mind, as it continues to mature and grow, it begins to get rewired. And now they're understanding what's possible and what's actually acceptable, because no one seemed to get in trouble when the uncle touched me the way he did. So I guess that's the way people experience love.
Right.
And so it sends them down a particular path. And a lot of the kids that we work with are already in the foster care system. They've already had their life blown up, and they are desiring healthy human interaction. They're desiring healthy male affection in the healthiest way. And the problem is that child can't tell the difference, because they've largely never seen it. It hasn't been modeled for them. And so everybody in every home is vulnerable at some level, but the largest percentage of these victims are kids who have had a rough childhood already. And it's expanded the boundaries of what's acceptable in their mind, and what's necessary. So it's really sad on a lot of levels.
Right. And what I heard you saying was these kids were introduced to this type of behavior by somebody that they knew. It's not somebody snatching them off the street out of a white van, right? It's somebody that these kids know.
But there is the occasional exception where there is something like you'd see in the movies, snatching them into a white van. There are kidnappings like that. However, the vast majority of the encounters, again, they start with someone close to them. That's how they get that close to them, because they're allowed into the home and they know them in that way. And then when that child is possibly taken out of their home and put into the foster care system, there really isn't a lot of supervision, and there really isn't a lot of protections around that child that makes them even more vulnerable. But yeah, it usually starts with people close to them.
Okay. Yeah. And I appreciate you for pointing that out, because there's I think a big misconception about that. So you have co-authored a book with a very striking title, entitled Men Fight for Me. And so before we get into what the book is about, tell me a little bit about that title.
Yeah, I was at an awareness event at a church on a Saturday down in the heart of LA, reaching out to their community to teach people about this issue. And my co-author, Jessica Midkiff, who is a survivor of sex trafficking, we call her and others like her lived experience experts. She was on the stage along with 5 or 6 others that had a similar story and a similar perspective. And they were talking about it. And next to Jessica was a woman named Rachel, who I didn't know at the time. Since then has become a friend and a contributor to this book. She tells her story in chapter 3 of the book. And she said something that grabbed a hold of me. She said, in the middle of describing the trauma she had gone through, she said, at some point, I gave up. She said, I could no longer fight for myself. I needed someone to fight for me. And that kind of lit me up a little bit, because what I had already known going into that day was that men are the problem in this particular crime. Most of the buyers are men, not all, but most. Most of the sellers, the traffickers, are men. And then I go to any event like this event I'm describing now, or some other kind of a training event, and there's almost no men there. It drives me crazy. Men are the problem, and there's no men, hardly any men, as part of the solution. And so right now I'm sitting in this audience, a couple hundred people there, and here's this trafficking survivor on the stage saying, I needed someone to fight for me. And okay, I'm in. This is my lane. I can speak to men in a way that women can't, because they're not women. I can challenge men in a way. I've seen things that other men haven't seen. I know things other men haven't known. And now I have my marching orders, because a trafficking survivor, I give up. And she tells her story in our book, talks about even attempted suicide. And she just had no way out, and she needed someone to fight for. So my challenges for men in this book, it sort of unwraps that, is to wake up. We're asleep at the wheel. There's things you can do. And there's children and young adults that are lost in a dark world. They need someone to help fight for them and get them out. So that's kind of the title of the book and some of the essence of the book.
Right. So you talk about a lot about authentic masculinity. Yeah. And I swear, like, masculinity means one thing to the media. It means one thing to you and me and to somebody else. What do you mean when you say authentic masculinity?
Yeah, if there's an authentic version, then there must be an inauthentic version. There must be a cheap counterfeit version, a diminished version, a twisted version. And that, sadly, is the version that is played out in our world today, in our society today, in the media, in the song lyrics. And so when I have a son and a daughter. My son was about 5 years old. I got together with a couple of buddies, and we read a book called Raising a Modern Day Knight. I recommend it to any dad out there who has sons.
Okay.
And so we took his lead, and job number one was to define what it means to be a real man. Give your son the gift of clarity. So we came up our definition, and I unpack it in the book in chapter 4. It's called Man to Man. And so what authentic masculinity is according to my working definition, and you could tweak it and add to it if you want, but one, he accepts responsibility. Not only the things that are directly his responsibility, but maybe that authentic, real, powerful, hopeful man steps into the responsibilities of his neighborhood, his community, his city, his state, the world, and takes on a bigger fight. He leads courageously. An authentic man doesn't succumb to the whims of social media or doesn't shrink away to whatever his buddies want to do on a Friday night. He's a leader. He's a leader amongst his community. He lives a life of service. When a man takes, he's lost all credibility. We're here to give. We're here to serve. We're here to add value, not take value. So an authentic man, a real man, gives rather than takes. And then pillar number 4 is he understands that who he is more important than what he does. And so like our word to our sons were, we don't care what job or profession, maybe you're going to go play pro sports, probably not, but maybe you do. Maybe you're going to be a CFO, maybe you're going to work at the corner store. Like, that's fine. Do whatever you want to do. But just know that more important than that is who you are on the inside, your integrity, your character, your honesty, your follow through, all those kinds of things. The interior is more important than the exterior. So that's our definition of authentic masculinity, a working definition. We celebrated it when we saw it, and we corrected it when we didn't see it. And you think about it, that's a world I want to live in. I want to live in a world where we've crossed the tipping point, and the majority of men are living in a way that accepts responsibility, that courageous leadership is shown. They're stepping into all these kinds of things. They're giving, they're not taking. There's no room for exploitation. There's no room for trafficking, because the guys around you wouldn't let you do it.
Right.
Would stamp it out. And so that's my urgent message to all men. Let's go, guys.
Yeah,
there's a better version of us that we must step into to fix this broken world.
Very good, man. Yeah, you got me fired up too. I appreciate that. So so you and Jessica, you guys wrote the book. Tell me about it, and tell me, what's the passion behind it?
Well, you caught a glimpse of quite a bit of it over the last few minutes, but me recognizing my lane and the urgent need to get men engaged in this conversation and living differently. I could speak to men all day long, and I've done that before, but I needed survivors, lived experience experts to bring it to life. Jessica was close to me. We worked together at Saving Innocence. And I asked her, and there's 5 other really amazing, prominent survivor ladies that are speaking into the book, sharing their stories. I'm told there isn't anything else like this out there, like a survivor-informed male that's speaking to men. It doesn't exist. And the goal is to change culture, to stamp out exploitation and trafficking. That's the ultimate goal, and we humbly submit the book to do that. And Jessica tells her story in a lot of detail, not too much where you can't read it, but some of you will have to put it down. And others do the same thing, so that we can change the narrative. We can activate men. We can equip them with the basic information that they need and the knowledge that they need, and then challenge them with some action items in the book and throughout the book. And then at the end of the appendix, there's all kinds of things you can do today. Here's big picture, macro, small picture, micro. Spoiler alert, guys, it starts with you in your house. It starts with you looking in the mirror and lining up your life, putting it in sync with a non-exploitive culture where human trafficking has no space and no room. It has to start with you in your life. The stuff you're doing on a Friday night after hours when your wife's not around. The ways you're thinking, and the ways you're leading your kids and loving your daughter, your young daughters and your young sons. It starts at home, and then it goes outward from there.
Very cool. And I took a look at the appendix in the book, and I really thought about how you start with this big, because it seems like it's this huge, massive problem, and you just bring it down closer and closer to where you are kind of looking in the mirror. So give me, and the men who are listening, and also the moms who are listening, give us a good example of what we can do personally to stop human trafficking.
Yeah. And I'm glad you included the moms.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of women reading this book, and they're absolutely loving it. It really is educational. Like I said, all these survivors breaking down. Like if you want to understand what's happening, and then you ladies, you have a lot of power in your husband or your boyfriend's life. You'll love the book. Make him read it too. Yeah. So, I mean, the big picture, I list about a dozen things that we can do from a societal standpoint, things you can vote for, people you can vote for. I don't give their names, but the kinds of things we're looking for in their campaign speeches, and the kinds of measures that come up that you vote for, things where we're going to allocate enough resources towards this problem, technology. There's a little bit of a movement that wants to fully decriminalize. I'm using air quotes if you're not on this video, fully decriminalize prostitution. And we would say we can't do that. We can't just completely legalize it because that's going to increase the demand. So these are things, we're giving you some tips of things to be watching for that are coming across your voting ballot, those kinds of things. It goes down to the kind of the individual stuff. Mostly dads are listening to this, mostly men. Guys, we have to have an honest conversation about pornography. It's the major on-ramp to, it actually, in fact, is exploitation of humans, but it's a major on-ramp to future buyers and future sellers and future victims. And by us consuming it, I know there's a huge percentage of men that dabble it, casually consume it, if not addicted. I can't come on a podcast like this and not let you know what I've learned.
Sure.
Most of the people you see on a screen in pornography, they're against their will in some form or fashion.
Okay.
They've been coerced in some way. We've had trafficking survivors tell us that they were literally trafficked, which is they had no choice. A human trafficking victim, they're owned. It's called the modern day slavery. They're slaves. They're forced to be in a motel room or a movie set of some kind. People come in, they gang rape her, they turn on a camera, and now that video makes itself on some porn site. Okay, so here's the problem, one among many. When you're sitting there watching porn after hours, when your wife or girlfriend's gone to bed, there's no way of knowing who's truly there consensually, and again, and who's there against their will. And I'm telling you that most of them are there against their will in some form. I'm no lawyer. I bet there's some lawyers listening right now, but non-consensual sex is called rape.
Right.
There should be yellow police tape around all our guys' computers. It's not a porn site. It's a crime scene. We are aiding and abetting. We're accomplices to a crime, literally, by consuming any form of pornography. So that's part of the challenge. Okay, we got to look in the mirror. You may thought it was a victimless crime. That's not true. So that's part of what we can do. And we can do a lot of other things. Again, it starts with us looking in the mirror, be the right kind of husband. Your kids are desperately needing an authentic, healthy version of a man in their life. And they're looking at you, Dad.
Yeah.
They're watching you. Like, you don't have to say that much. They're watching how you talk to your wife, their mom. They're watching, do you hire a babysitter and let them know, because me and your mom are going out on a date night because I love your mom and we're going to spend time together. Like that's important for them to see that. Because we want your sons, when they get older, to go on date nights and honor the woman that they're with. And we want your daughters to understand what's possible and what they should expect, what they deserve. They deserve honor and respect. And all that starts with you living your life out loud right there with your kids. They're watching how you're going to interact with the waitress in the restaurant. They're watching what kind of TV shows and music you allow in the house. All those things are being encoded with, okay, this is how you do life. This is how I'm a man. This is how I'm a woman. Because most of the messages that are coming not from you, that are coming from outside, are speaking something very different, a counterfeit version, a diminished version of masculinity and manhood. And that's a dangerous proposition for this world.
It is. And you've led me to another question here, but I want to kind of echo what you say, because I talk about on this podcast that your kids are watching you. They are learning from you. And so for you to come up and say that really resonates with me, and it resonates to the people who are listening to this show. Because, when I talk about, getting out of your car, making sure the doors are locked, looking around, that sort of thing, your kids are going to pick up on that, but they're also going to pick up on how you treat your spouse and how your family runs, because that's what they're going to mimic later on in life. So you've talked about at the core, human trafficking starts by having a good supportive home. You mentioned outside influences being the media and culture, how do we as parents help our kids distinguish between what's good in the home and what's being said out in the media?
That's such a great question. And I know you're reading the book, Andy. I don't know if you got to this part yet, but there's a point when I quote a good buddy of mine who's a Secret Service agent for now 25 years or so. And, when the Secret Service isn't protecting important people, kind of their day job is to break up counterfeit currency rings. And he said something really profound to me that I put in the book. I think it's chapter 4. He said, in order to break up counterfeit currency rings, we spend 90% of our time studying the authentic bill, learning all the nuances of the authentic bill. And that allows us to spot the counterfeit 100 miles away, is what he said. So I can't say it loud enough, guys. You have to be present with your kids, not just physically present. You have to be emotionally present. Don't just, depending on what their age is and what it is. A lot of times we use a tablet or a TV almost as a babysitter. And I guess there's times when they need to watch a show that, and you're not right there with them, but make sure strategically you sit on the couch with them, interpret what's coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And now, when I was growing up, Andy, I'm showing my age here, but when you missed a TV show, it was gone forever.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
So now you could just hit a little pause button and you can stop it. And so dads, when you're sitting on the couch and a commercial comes on and they're selling sex, but they'd like you to believe they're selling hamburgers, like it's just ridiculous portrayal of, what's happening, hit pause. And again, in an age appropriate thing, and say, can you believe hey guys, what do you think they're trying to sell here? Well, they're trying to sell hamburgers. Well, but look at the way that girl's dressed. What do you think? What's happening here? And we can talk about those things, interpret life as it's coming, and then hit play again. And you haven't lost anything. So how can we equip our kids, dads, be present, engage, the old Top Gun movie, engage Maverick, engage,
Yeah.
get back in the battle. And it's not complicated. Do life with your kids. Don't let somebody else do life with them. Interpret life as it's coming. Let them see you be a healthy version of a man. And that's gonna accomplish more than you know.
Yeah. And I often encourage the parents who listen to this show to talk to their kids and not just, because sometimes you talk to your kid and you're like, hey, how was your day? Good. And you're like, okay, well, you don't want to engage in that right now. So I will go 2 or 3 times a day and I'll ask my kid, hey, what was good about today? What was the funniest thing that happened today? What was the scariest thing that happened today? And that's when you really can start to judge where they are in life, because you're present and you are consistent in talking to them and making sure that you are investing in them and they are feeling like they are being invested in. That is fantastic, Alan. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for what you're doing. I know people are going to want to know more about you and the book. Where can they find you in Saving Innocence?
Yeah, I would love for everyone to go to fightforme.net. It's a little website we created around this book. It's for sale on Amazon. You go straight to Amazon and buy it. Type in Men Fight For Me if you want. But just add one step. Go to fightforme.net. And there's a lot of other resources there. There's a YouTube channel. We're interviewing the people that are in the book. We're starting to fill that up with other conversations if you're interested. There's these survivors I mentioned. They've got links to their websites and books that they've written. It's just a great first step. And then it's notable to say that proceeds from this book are benefiting survivors of sex trafficking. So I can very unapologetically say, everybody, buy as many books as you can, give them out to all the men in your life, buy a case of them. And you'll know that any cash that's received is going to benefit these survivors that are in the book, which is great. So go to fightforme.net, get a bunch of books, and then go to savinginnocence.org. That's an agency that myself, my co-author work at. And there's a bunch of videos there to watch. And I'm on there saying things and she's on there. And there's you can learn about our organization and our agency. And along the way, you can start following all those things on social media and be part of the conversation.
Awesome, Alan. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here and talking to us in a very real way about what men can do to stop human trafficking, man. God bless you.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.